Hi, Gordon. One of the things we've previously shown in some of our videos is an AC optimization in which we just point to a condenser and say that that's one of the most effective ways that you can make your air conditioner on a 123 or a 126 work more effectively. Today, we've had a lot of people ask us, to film exactly how to put that condenser on there, so that's what we're going to do today. So, the condenser that we're going to replace is this one. It's right in front of the radiator. It's the AC condenser. And of course, the very first thing you need to do before you open the system is you got to have the Freon evacuated from the system. So you got to first of all get all the Freon out of there. But once you do, then we're going to replace this condenser. It's what's called a series pass condenser. You see all these loops. Well, the Freon goes through there one loop at a time, and it's a very inefficient heat exchanger. There's a much more efficient way to do that, a modern way to do that, which is a parallel flow condenser, and we'll show you which one we're going to put on there. But in order to get this condenser off of here after we take the Freon out, you got to take this fan off, and then it'll come right out. It's not difficult at all, and then we're going to have to custom make some brackets. But let's go over here and look at the condenser that we're going to put on there. Now the condenser we're going to put on there is called a 4-pass. It's a parallel flow. You see it has an input and an output on the same side. And actually what happens is the Freon flow, over one half of this thing, the Freon flows this way in tubes that are all running in parallel. It's collected in a manifold on this side, and then it flows across and is collected. Now if we look at exactly the number, by the way, this thing is 14 inches this way, and the dimension this way is 22 inches. It's a generic kind of a condenser, and it fits very nicely into this 123 body. If we get up close and we look at a number, the max air number on it, made in the USA, is 52612-0437C. It takes, we're going to use hose I think this is size 6. Yeah, the smaller hose is size 6, which is equivalent to 5/16 or 8 millimeter, and the fittings that go with it. That's the small hose. The large hose is called number 8 hose. It's 10 millimeter or 13/32 of an inch. 10 millimeter, also called size 8 hose, with the fittings that go with that. Now we need about 4 feet, actually a little less, but we get 4 feet of that hose. And the number 8 fitting that we need, and also matches what's on the Mecedes on the this side is underneath the air cleaner on the engine. We need a straight fitting, and we just went ahead and had one crimped on there. You could get a crimp on or a clamp on, it doesn't matter. And then the other end of that, we're going to need a 90-degree to go with that number 8 hose. And it's going to mount on the large end with O-rings on the condenser. And then on the number 6 hose, we're going to need 2 fittings. They're both the same size that fit on the number 6 hose, and they're going to go on the condenser. One side's on the condenser and the other side is going to go on the evaporator, and we're going to need some clamps for these hoses. And actually we've got several feet. We only need about a foot of this hose. We'll show you as we actually mount it. And of course we need some O-rings to go with each of these 4 fittings. So we got some hose and fittings and a condenser, and we also need some brackets. Now we already made our brackets because we know what size, and I'll measure them for you. This thing is a generic kind of a condenser, so you see it's got mounting holes up and down on both sides. I've mounted several of these, and I use 3 mounting brackets. Now what I use for mounting for material, for raw material, is just it's 1/8 inch flat stock, what I call flat stock. It came as a 4 4 feet in length, a 4-foot piece. It's 1/8 inch thick like that, and it's about 1/2 inch wide. Let's measure it. Maybe it's 1 inch wide. I don't know. No, it's actually 3/4 of an inch wide. So it's 1/8 inch by 3/4. So I took that, and what I need is just a you know, some drill bits and a drill and a hacksaw to cut it, and a punch and a hammer to make the holes, and a file, and of course I had a set of glasses here. Now let me measure these for you. I made one of them. It's about 3/4 to an inch before the bend, before the 90-degree bend. And it's got a hole that's about 1/2 inch from one end, you see. 1/2 inch from one end to the hole. And then the other hole, the other mounting hole, is about exactly 2.5 inches. From the center of that hole to the end of that bracket is 2.5 inches. So that's one of the brackets. The other two brackets, instead of a 90-degree bend like that, need a little offset in these brackets. This dimension on that offset, I believe, is 1/2 inch on one of them, roughly 1/2 inch. Maybe it's 3/8 of an inch. It's not that critical. And then the distance between these two holes is right at 2 inches. So 2 inches from there to there on that bracket. There's another bracket. It's got a little different offset. It's right at 1/2 inch too. Actually, this one was more like 3/8. That's about 1/2 inch. And as I say, it's not very critical. And this one is 1.5 inches from one hole to the other. Now, I made these holes 5/16 of an inch, and I'm going to use mounting hardware. I use a number 7 millimeter metric. And I think the pitch on that is by 1. It's not critical either. You could have used like 1/4 inch bolts if that's the hardware that you have. I just stick with the metric size because everything else is metric on the car. And you see, I made it nice and comfortable. I drilled like a 5/16 inch hole in those brackets so that I get a little slop. As you can see, once we mount it, it's going to be real tight. So I just use a nut and a lock washer. And so I just mounted in 3 places. 2 on one side, 1 on the other, and it's not a very difficult job, so let's get to it. Once you can go ahead and make these brackets ahead of time. It'll save you a lot of work as you go through this process. Okay, now we're going to take this condenser off, and we've got some lines to disconnect in the engine compartment. But before we do that, we're gonna disconnect some of this. It really doesn't matter the order. To disconnect those lines, I'm going to need several wrenches, and for a backup, I just use a big crescent. I've also got a 19 millimeter, a 22 millimeter, and a 27 millimeter. If you don't have all those big sizes, if you had 2 crescent wrenches, you could probably get those air conditioning lines off of there. In order to remove the fan and the condenser, I need a pair of dikes, just a regular socket set and a 3/8 drive and a little screwdriver. The little screwdriver, the very first thing I'm going to have to do is pull this plastic piece off right here. And there's a screw right in the middle that first comes undone. And then there's some little plastic brads. You just have to cut them. They sometimes will pop out, but more than likely you're going to wreck things if you try to pop them out. I just put screws back in there. So what you have to do is just cut them off, because they typically are old and they just won't come out of there very easily. So I just take a pair of dikes and cut the tops of them off and then get them out. Okay, now that I have those off, I just want to take this plastic piece out, you see, because what I need to do in order to get this condenser out and get the new one in, I got to take these two bars off of here. And it's also the access to the brackets that hold this thing on. You can see that the very first thing that'll be necessary is to take this off. Now this thing actually has a plug-in connection, and I won't make Gordon get under the car, but essentially around the area of the headlights is where the plug is for this thing, and we need to take it off. So we got some tie wraps. We're just going to cut the tie wraps, but we want to unplug the thing, and I'll get in underneath there and unplug it. As I say, I won't make Gordon get down underneath there. It's not difficult to find. By the way, we make a video on how to replace this fan, and in that video it shows exactly where that plug is, but it's right on the bottom of the oil cooler. It sits in a little bracket right there. You can't plug it in backwards like on Mercedes plugs. It's polarity sensitive, so don't worry about that. Now the next thing we want to do is take these brackets off and take that fan out of there. So looks like 10 millimeter, and I might need some wrenches, some end wrenches too, because the ones under here are kind of nasty. But so we want to take these bolts off, and then likewise there are bolts that bolt it to near the front bumper. You'll be able to see them. Take those two off, and then there are two right here. One on this side, one on this side, and I can't remember whether I can get a socket on those or not. They're in kind of a nasty position, but they don't have a nut. They're just able, because of the nature of this ratchet, which is a flexible ratchet, I'm able to get it underneath there. You might not be able to do that with yours unless you got a ratchet like this. You might have to use just a 10 millimeter open-in box-in combination wrench. Now there was one right here on the top that I failed to mention. I had to take that one off. Now we've gotten all 5 of the bolts now. 2 on top, 2 on bottom, 1 right in the middle that holds that bracket. And after we get those, this thing will just come right out of there. Okay, and we show this on another video, how to replace this fan. I don't think we took the brackets off in the other video. I think we actually removed these clamps. But at any rate, we need to get that out of there. So now we have access. Now there are 4 brackets that hold this thing on there. 2 here, 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, and 1 up here. And I can't remember whether we also are going to have to pull the radiator, but I think we can get it out without pulling the radiator. We'll try. But before we pull that, let's take the lines off. So let me show you the lines that we have to get to, and this is where we're going to need our open-end wrenches. Okay, now you want to make sure that this thing is flat. In other words, have someone pump the Freon out of this thing before you do this. Don't do this with pressure, because we're going to take off some air conditioning lines. We've taken the air cleaner off, and right behind the alternator, and I'll point to it with this wrench, right behind the alternator is one of the air conditioning lines. It's the big line that we want to take off. It's right there. You see that? So that's the first one. We want to loosen that. That's the 27 millimeter. We're going to back it up with a 22. As I say, if you had a big crescent, you could probably get it in there. But we're going to take that line off first. I said we're going to back it up with a 22. Okay, so we'll loosen that. Take that line off. We're going to have to take that line off at both ends. And it's in kind of an awkward spot. I'll give them that much for putting it on. But once you loosen it up, it shouldn't be that hard. Now I had it flat, and now there's just a little bit seeping out of there, not much. Now that line connects at its other place right up here by the headlight. So again, it's a 27 millimeter. We need to back that one up so that we don't destroy this condenser. Taking it off of there. And I don't know, that might be a 23. I just use a crescent on that one.
just because it's handy. That one wasn't very tight. Okay, so I'm going to take that line off, and then it's secured by a little 8mm sheet metal screw. You can see it, it's secured to the frame of the car right there, little bracket. We're going to have to take that off. Okay, now we got that big hose off of there. One of the things I did to make it easier is just pull the alternator plug off the back of the alternator. It gave me a little more room in there to work. Now to get this other hose off, I picked up a 17mm. I'm going to use that to hold the dryer right here. And this hose, I've just loosened it, but see, I held it like that. And so this little tiny hose that goes to the dryer right here, I need to pull off there at that fitting, and it's going to come real easy. And then I believe that's also a 17mm that I'll need to back up on this side. And so I also need to pull that hose off right there. There, it wasn't that tight. And so we're not going to be able to reuse these hoses. So we're just going to take these two off. Now, probably a little oil in these things, so be careful. You get it all over the place if you're not careful. We'll take this hose and move it aside too. We won't need it. Okay, now we're going to remove the brackets. That one is there. They're just sheet metal screws that hold this thing on there. There are 4 of them. I just got a 8mm or a 5/16, either one, nut driver. Just take these 4 sheet metal screws off. And as I say, I can't remember. It's been a while since I've done one of these. I might have to tilt that radiator back. I don't think we have to take it all the way out. But I can't recall whether we got enough room to get it out of there or not without the radiator. Now you see it dropped back. Okay, now in order to get that out, we did have to move that radiator back. We didn't have to pull it out, so we don't have to drain the radiator water, but I tilted the radiator back, so I just undid the top 2 clamps, pushed it back, and that allowed me to move the entire condenser down or back and get those brackets out of there. So now I've got the condenser out, and we're going to go back in with the condenser, but we have to drill a hole about 1/4 or 5/16 of an inch right here. We're going to use that to mount the condenser, so it's right on this corner. It's where one of the old screws was. And then you remember those little plastic tangs. We don't want to forget to knock those out of there, because we're going to have to put sheet metal screws back in their place. And so just punch those out of there. Now we've already prepared this condenser, and you need to pay careful attention, because this thing is a really, really tight fit. What we want is the big hose on top. And we've already mounted also our brackets, but we want the big hose on top pointing down, and of course we've got an O-ring on there, and we put the clamp on ahead of time. And the small hose, the number 6 hose, the 5/16, goes on the bottom, the 8mm. Now it points up. And we got to get that bracket kind of behind into the back so it's not in the way. And this one is going to have to come in front. Now we're going to put it in there, and now the small hose we haven't yet cut. It's going to be about 1 foot long. You can see we got plenty of hose. The big hose, because we had it crimped on this end, we've cut it. And we cut it to 44 inches of hose length between the crimped piece and this very end of it up here. We measured it very carefully. Now, this hose, this big hose, if you look, there's a hole right here in front of the radiator, and we're going to poke this hose down through that hole. The small hose we're going to bring up, and it's going to go where the previous hoses went, right there at about mid-radiator height. And so we've got to very carefully put both of those in there. Now, as I say, this hose is the one that's easy. It goes through that hole right there. Okay? That's the easier of the two. And we'll cut that one to length later. And actually, it looks like it's... Okay, we completely got this in there. Now, I'll tell you what we did. First of all, we started with this radiator tilted back, so these brackets weren't on here. We put these two hoses on here, as I showed you. And of course, the big hose points down, the little hose points up. Now look at the configuration of the hoses. The two are essentially aligned. Now we used a bracket right next to the headlight. That was the longer of those two brackets that's not bent at 90 degrees. And we put that hose right down there between the radiator and the body. So you see right at the bottom of the radiator is where that hose feeds through. And it feeds through there, and then we'll show you how we snake it up and make the connection later. So that's the big hose. The little hose, you see it right there, it goes through the previous hole that was used for the condenser. It is a very, very tight fit. You're going to have to be very patient to get that in there like that. This is the hose coming through. We're going to cut that one to length. Now the brackets on the other side, remember we drilled a hole right there, about 1/4 of an inch. So we used our big long 90-degree bracket there. And next to the headlight, same place as the other, we mounted this bracket. So you see that thing is mounted, and it's got about 1 inch play or so, about the width of my finger, a little more than the width of my finger, between the radiator and the condenser. And it's mounted and it's very, very solid. It'll never come loose. And it's enough room so that the fan will mount in front of it. Now we could even count the holes for you. This bracket is mounted the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th hole down. This one is the 11th hole from the top. This 7th hole, by the way, is from the connection. The 7th hole down from the connection, the 11th hole down from the connection, and then 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So that one is 5 more holes off. That was 16th hole down. So now we've got that. Now we make the hose connections and mount our fan back, and we're ready to charge it back up. So let's go look underneath and see how we routed this hose. The big hose, the 10mm hose, it comes up and right underneath the frame, and we gave it enough room to where we put it, we'll mount it kind of out of the way and in front of the radiator hose, the bottom radiator hose. So we're going to pull it here, we're going to attach it later with a bracket, and we're going to go ahead and connect it. Now of course we got an O-ring on there. It's in a nasty spot, but so you just have to be patient. Now I got it started. You see the way it sits, it's underneath the little water pump, auxiliary water pump, and it's mounted kind of up here in front of the frame. And I'm going to take the same bracket and clamp it down to the frame so it's all out of the way. Now this hose is real straightforward. All I'm going to do is cut this one to length and just put a 90-degree fitting on there. So we're going to cut this hose, put a 90-degree fitting on there. Let me go get that fitting and we'll just cut it right now. What is with that? The O-ring is still in there. I have to put a new O-ring on it, but I just want to measure it for right now. There. Now you see, I just want that one right there. So, cut that hose, put a little oil on there to make it slide in easier, and we'll put that on. And we'll be ready to mount the fan.
Okay.
Okay. We got the O-ring on there. We got the thing cut. And now we got the clamp. All you have to do is tighten that clamp, tighten that nut, tighten this one. So we'll do that in a minute. Let's go back to mounting this fan. Fan is real straightforward. Just mounts right back. You should have plenty of clearance between the fan and the condenser now. These nuts on the bottom are a little nasty, but otherwise they're okay. And then what we're going to do is just put sheet metal screws in this plastic piece right here. Remember, we had to knock those little brads out. Once we get it all assembled, we'll just put sheet metal screws in that. But essentially we're finished. Now we'll just tighten up those bolts and or those connections, those pipe connections, the fittings. And then after that, we just need to charge it up. So we're done. Gordon, this is another car. We just showed you how to put a condenser on in one way where we didn't take the radiator off. This is some months later, and we're putting a condenser on another car. And there's a second way to put one on, which is, and it's actually a lot easier, and that's to have the radiator out. If we have the radiator out of the car, we can mount the brackets that we told you about loosely to the condenser. We mount the hoses just like we showed you before. We don't cut the hose that goes to the receiver dryer yet, but the hose that goes to the connection near the crankcase behind the alternator is cut to length, and we happen to have a crimped on fitting on this particular one. Remember, that one is like 48 inches long. And we've already mounted that one up, and without the radiator it's real easy. It's not as hard to get in there. So we mount this and then mount the radiator back. We're doing some other things to this car, so we had the radiator out, and we're just going to do this. Now, with the radiator out, you can see the hole that this particular hose goes through. It goes through this hole right here, and it comes out right behind, or right in front of the horn right there. So we're going to run this hose through this hole, and remember, this is a real tight fit. And this hose, the little hose, is going to run through there where the previous hoses ran through on the previous condenser. So we've got this hose plugged up on the end, and it may take two of us, but you'll get the idea. Gordon's on the camera right now, but what we're going to do is run this hose through there, and we'll come back and get it later and route it into the right place. Just let it run under there for right now. And then we've got to put the brackets in the right spot. It may be a little tricky because we've already got this hose mounted. I might have should have put it on there, but let's see if I can just go ahead and snake it through there. It goes through that hole. Might be kind of hard with one person. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do the whole thing, but we'll see. There we go. Now if we look around on the front end, I'm going to mount the, as you recall, that bracket. Essentially we want this condenser parallel to this front bracket that goes right across the front of the car here, the frame of the car. So we want the condenser to be right parallel with that when we finish the mounting. And now I've got a bracket that's a little out of place. I'm going to have to actually undo a nut back here. But you see, as soon as I undo that nut, I'm going to be able to mount it in three places that we talked about before, and get it just parallel with the front of this. But now my hoses at least are in place, and that's one of the most difficult parts. Now I'm going to have to cut this hose to length later. That's easy enough, and I'm going to have to snake this other one up around. So let's do some work and come back and show you what it looks like. It's essentially mounted. We won't show tightening up all the little screws, but you get the idea. So you see that bracket? I'm going to have to move it in front of that hose right there. But mostly we're in good shape here. Now, we've been messing with this a little bit, the brackets, but we just wanted to show you what it looks like from the inside as we mount it. We've got it mounted essentially flush, maybe a little in front of this brace that goes across where the hood latch is, and parallel this way,
and we've put this hose, notice the routing of this hose. The top hose is the large hose, and it's going to go down and through this hole right here, right there, and it's going to come right out right here. And then we're going to snake this around, and this is actually a little long. 48 inches is a little long. We could have done even 44, 46 inches, but we've got plenty of room to back this hose up into this position. So we haven't hooked it up yet, but we will in a minute. So that, and then we're going to get it, and we're going to clamp it down against the body. There's a little hole in the frame right there, and we'll just get a C-clamp and clamp that hose down. And then of course we'll cut that when we showed you how to do that in the earlier installation. We'll cut that and mount it to the dryer. And of course for this car we've still got to put the hood on. Now from the shroud and the radiator, but from the front, depends on exactly how these little homemade brackets are made, but you could mount that bracket in front or back. But the way we do it is on one side we put the one bracket, and on the other side we put two brackets. And we've got a little room this way because these holes where these headlight frames are pretty big to where the condenser will slide back and forth this way. And in terms of the clearance between the shroud, essentially you can just get your fingers started underneath there. So about the width of your fingers is the distance between the fan and the condenser once we get it installed on both sides. I can barely get my fingers, which are just medium-sized man's hand, underneath there. And so that's it. It's a real nice, clean installation, and guarantee you they really work.